All right. Well, hi, hello, and welcome to Who Wants to Be an AppSec-ionaire? Today's webinar is sponsored by /security and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I'm so happy that I get to be your moderator for this conversation today because we are going way off book. We, in fact, are stepping totally out of the webinar, and we are instead going into a game show studio to play this fun and interactive game with all of you at home. That's right, my friends. All of you are now contestants in our exciting game show designed to test your AppSec skills and give you some key insights from our expert host as well as our expert guest contestant. Now, I can't wait to get today started and get our game rolling, but we have a few housekeeping things that we need to get through that are going to help you get the most out of our time together here in our game show studio. So let's get those out of the way and then we can get things on the road here. All right, so we're going to take a little tour of your audience console, and I want to start with the question section. Now, this is going to be incredibly important today because we want to hear from you throughout the day. So there are two ways that you are going to interact with us. One is that we're going to put some questions up on the screen. You've seen these before. We use them as polls or we talk about them as wish lists. This is our interactive question console today. So you're going to be answering questions in the screen on those poll questions, and we'll come to those in just a moment. But the other way that you can interact with us is in this questions window on your audience console. If you can't find it, it's there right next to your handouts tab. In that questions window, you will be able to post your questions, your insightful thoughts. If you have any follow-ups to some of the AppSec-ionaire questions that we're going through today, please do post. We want to be hearing from you. We're going to do our best to answer questions as we go through our session today. If we don't get to your session or your question during our live webinar, we will get a follow-up to you in response after we wrap. So keep those questions coming in. If you haven't already done it, let's give our little window here a test run right now. Post. I see Andre, I see Steve, I see Ben, I see Zhang, I saw Marteza and Edgar, I see Ed, hey John, hey Andrew, we got a whole awesome crew with us here today. Say hi, say hello, give it a little test run, make sure you know where that questions window is today because you are going to want to be able to interact with us as we go through. I do also want to remind you that that section is the best place to reach out to the Actual Tech Media crew. So if you're having any trouble today with slides or audio, something little tech gremlins have gotten in the system, no problem. You're going to post in that questions window. Before you do that, though, a browser refresh is going to get rid of most of the usual tech gremlins. So try a browser refresh first, but if that's not working, if someone definitely fed them after midnight, and that happens from time to time, then you're just going to post in that questions window and we will be there to help you out. I see lots of you. Hey, Kevin. Hey, Matt. Hey, Steve. We got a whole awesome crew with us here today. I love it. Keep that up, my friends. Let's keep that energy flowing. All right. Well, I mentioned the handouts tab earlier when we talked about where the questions section is. Right next to that is the handout section. So you're going to find some really great resources and takeaways. And there's going to be lots of opportunities for you to learn a little bit more about Backslash, especially booking that demo. I'm going to come back to that a little bit more, but just make sure that you've got that handouts window open. Make sure you open all of those tabs, all of those links. Hold on to those for later because you'll want to revisit those once we wrap our exciting game show today. And it is not just wonderful content and fun games ahead of us. We also have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Now, you do need to be here in live attendance at our exciting game show in order to win, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, you can head on back to the handouts tab that we were just chatting about. You can find the full terms and conditions waiting for you there. All right, now we are going to tweak. Those of you who have been in a webinar with us before, you know about our $50 best question gift card. We are going to tweak this a little bit. So today, the $50 best question gift card is going to go for the best answers, the most answers, our most interactive contestants. So we want you to be involved and interactive answering these questions. So what we will do is choose our winner randomly from those of you who are participating and answering those polls. So that is how you're getting entered to win this $50 best question gift card. And again, all those T's and C's applies. If you have questions about that, find those in the handouts tab. Okay, my friends, that was a lot of information that I threw at you right at the start, which means you are warmed up, you are ready, you're firing on all cylinders, and I am going to bring our incredible expert host and guest contestant out here with us. Today, we will be chatting with Amit, Bismut, head of product at /security, and we get to chat with James Berthoty, founder at Tech. I'm going to let them them introduce themselves a little bit more. Amit and James, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the game show.
Woo! Thank you, Jess. Hey, everybody. So I'm super happy to be here today. Jess?
Yeah, Amit, I want to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about what the audience can expect and what we're going to be playing in Who Wants to Be an AppSec-ionaire?
Yes, so first it's AppSec-ionaire, inspired by Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So thank you, and thank you everybody for joining for this great session. My name is Amit. I'm leading the product management at Berthoty Security, which is an AppSec security company. And today I'm super happy to host James in this trivia game. James, please tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name's James. I have a history of doing security engineering, and anyone who's in here knows just how wide of a variety of things that means. I've been everything from startups doing product work up to currently I'm at PagerDuty, and we are FedRAMP in process. And so that's a lot of my current experience. And I created Latio Tech just as a way to try to help people find products that actually help them do stuff. Because I have done a ton of disappointing product evaluations to good ones over the years. And so it's just meant to be a resource that's unbiased to help you find products. So thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's understand what we're having for today. So we have a short trivia game inspired by Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It's 12 questions. And we start with the easiest level, level 1, which is based on factual questions. Later on, we'll move to more harder questions, and eventually we'll reach the last level, which is more subjective or opinionated. For each question, you will have the poll. We'll have around the 30 seconds for each question for you guys to answer. And then we'll try to guess what will be your answer and what will be the actual answer. And James will give us the answers. So with that context, we're gonna start. One last thing, James, you have one clue. If you want for any question, you can ask for a clue. You don't have to, but you can. Let's start with the first question. So how many new vulnerabilities were published in NVD in the last month? We had to have the sound. So A, 2,500, B, 1,200, or C, 200. And with that, let's run the poll. And
okay, 30 seconds on the clock. You ready? 30 seconds. Oh, you know what? I'm going to give you 45 for this first question. 45 seconds. James, what do you got?
Yeah. So my gut here is gosh, I need the background music so that it feels hard thinking. But my temptation is always to pick the highest number, because it definitely feels like there are 2,500 vulnerabilities coming out a day, with the amount of how many scanner results come in and how just nightmarish it is. So that's how I'm leaning, but the number does seem sort of comically high. Plus we have to rely on the NVD working in the first place. And so there's its own drama there. But since we're out of time, I think I'm going to go with the first one, 2,500.
Okay, let's see. It looks like the audience got it.
Yeah, so it seems like the audience got the right answer. So like I said, the right answer is A, 2,500. And if we look at NVD dashboard, which shows the statistics of the vulnerabilities, on the last month, we had more than 3,000 vulnerabilities that were published. This is interesting. This is the vulnerabilities that are being published, but NVD do more processing on the information to give them the severity. And recently they had some challenges. So too many vulnerabilities even for NVD. Going to the next question. So out of the vulnerabilities that are published, what is the severity percentage for the vulnerabilities that are analyzed from critical, high, medium, and low? So A, 16% are critical and 1% is low. B, we have 12% which is critical and 14% which are low. more lows on B. And C, 5% and 29, which gives more weight to the lowest vulnerabilities. So let's
start the clock here, James. Are you ready?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, go.
Yeah, the temptation here, from experience, when there's so many false positives that I've seen, I think my temptation is to go with the biggest low number. But luckily, because of FedRAMP, I know better now because I have to actually adjust a ton of CVSS scores for everything. And I think I've almost never seen a low by the time CVSS gets done having its way with vulnerabilities. So I'm actually going to go with the first one, that there's almost no lows and everything's medium and above.
Okay, should we check the results? Or so we're going low. Let's see what the audience said. I see a right answer was C. Okay. Whoop. Yep.
Wow, straight split.
Holy, wow. Ooh. You guys were, that was tied across the board.
Okay, so with that, let's see the actual answer. So the answer is A. James, you are right. So, and this is the statistics from NVD website. And you can see, like you said, on the yellowish color, this is the low severity vulnerabilities. It's 1%, which gives, most of the vulnerabilities are not low. To me, it's a bit surprising. I honestly thought that it would be distributed almost evenly. But if you think about it, all the vulnerabilities that are being reported, they're not just trying to compare them one to another. They just use the CVSS and all those criteria. And if it's critical, it's critical.
What I think an interesting piece is that it's always scored based on like the worst case exploitation. And then there's like the environmental scores that bring that down after the fact. And so I think they're really leaning into the idea that people are doing these environmental manipulations, which is why the tool situation is so bad, is because like the tool's just reporting the CVSS score to you, like with no environmental stuff to it. And so you're not able to downgrade the risk the way that you would be if you were like sitting there with the CVSS calculator, which I hope no one on this call is having to go through that, because it stinks really bad doing that. So
right. So if you think about it, NVD is optimized to not having false negatives, right? They don't want to miss any vulnerability, and they don't want to say that it's low severity. We can clearly see that from different cases and from the severity rating as well.
Yep.
Amit, before you move on, does that make sense to you and James that the audience was so evenly distributed on those answers? Is that what you guys would have expected to see?
Yep. I mean, for me, I wouldn't. You could really go almost any way based on your personal experience with seeing the vulnerabilities, I think.
I think that people think that many of the vulnerabilities are not critical because they consider not only the base severity, but also the other contextual information in their environment, like James said. But when judging just by the CVSS base score, which is the theoretical score, it shows that most of them are not low, but high and then more than that.
Okay, I like it.
Okay, so moving to the next question. By PCI DSS, the compliance standard, which vulnerability severity need to be fixed by organizations to be compliant? A, all vulnerabilities, everything. B, medium and above. Or C, high and above. And with that, let's start the poll.
Yep.
Audience.
So here I'm going to lean on, I was lucky enough to, one of the companies I was with, we created a platform for vulnerability automation. And I was lucky enough to be one of the engineers automating every single finding and how it mapped to compliance frameworks. And so that was a tough job, but I feel confident that it's medium and above for PCI.
Okay, so let's see what the audience chose. And okay, we have an even results between medium and high. To be honest, I would choose high and above, because this is how most of the people in the industry refer to what is actually things that they need to address or prioritize. But looking at the actual answer, the answer is medium and above by PCI. So this is the quote. Basically, in the requirement, they ask to fix everything which is in the score of 4 and above, which is medium. The funny part is that medium and above is basically 99% of the vulnerabilities, if we looked at the previous question. So it's not including the low, which is like, everything.
Yeah, this problem is so difficult to think about because honestly, everything except FedRAMP, I think you have some degree of hand waving you can do here, because even how that says like generally it's like what counts as a vulnerability, what counts as a finding, what's the scope. Like if you're just getting started with compliance, your favorite word should be scope, because you can just like scope whatever you want and use it to just sort of play these compliance games with each other. But with FedRAMP, since you have to give the auditor the raw output of the scan, like there is no scope game. Like you are giving them the raw results. And so I think that's what makes FedRAMP so challenging for orgs, is that it's forcing you to reckon with the reality that like almost nobody actually is able to do this for modern containerized architectures that aren't just like running a Windows update every week. And I think that's what causes the confusion, is the compliance frameworks are still, most of them are lenient enough that they haven't quite figured out how to handle cloud architectures and the amount of vulnerabilities that get found.
Correct. And I think that in PCI they do have a... Yes, Jess.
Go ahead, Amit. I have a question for you when you finish your thought.
Yeah, so I think that in PCI they do have a very specific scope. The documents start with the scope. You have to start with what is actually exposed and create a risk, and only then it makes more sense to basically address those vulnerabilities. But I would challenge that. I don't, from my experience, it's really challenging to try to fix 99% of the vulnerabilities. It never happens.
Yeah.
So I think it's unrealistic.
Yeah, it makes it so people do the scope thing, because it's the answer to sort of making it real, is if you can just scope it to like, all right, well, the credit card gets inputted on the front end of our application, so we'll fix our JavaScript vulns, and then it gets directly input to a database, so we'll fix our database vulns. Like you've essentially acted as though you're in the entire cardholder environment is like these two things, when in reality, like we know there's a lot more happening between all those different instances.
Yeah, so to add more,
I think you guys just answered the audience question that we had. So I think you nailed it, because the audience was pointing out that often if you try to fix medium and above, that the workload of that is overwhelming. And I think that's probably something that a lot of people can relate to, is so maybe starting with the more critical vulnerabilities as at least having a place to start.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why so often I've seen PagerDuty is one of the few places I've been where we did a FedRAMP scope assessment and then actually moved forward with it. Everywhere else I've been, the FedRAMP, we're like thinking about it, looking at the controls, is it going to be good or not? But then we hit this requirement of hitting the vulnerability timelines based on the raw output. And it's what makes it so that most organizations don't decide to move forward with FedRAMP, is because they recognize just how almost unobtainable that's going to be without a ton of organizational buy-in from top to bottom to really address it.
And from my experience in some organizations, when you scan the infrastructure, you have millions instances of vulnerabilities. So you can't really manage it. It's unmanageable. So if we look at the actual percentage, the actual answer is all vulnerabilities, because it's 99% of the vulnerabilities. So realistically, it's everything. And the key is in the scope, like you said. Okay, so moving to the next question. Which technology is more vulnerable to out-of-bound writes, those memory-related vulnerabilities? A, Java, using Maven. B, .NET. Or C, Python. And let's start the poll.
30 seconds. In general, I think of Java as a vulnerability a nightmare zone that I never want to be in. But for memory related vulnerabilities, I definitely basically I just think the closer you're getting to like pointer manipulation and like down to the hardware manipulation level is where you're more likely to see memory related stuff. So I got to go with Python for this one because of the C relationship that the language has.
Right. So, Jess, do we have any more time or?
No, we're totally out of time. That was it, audience.
So everybody or most of the people chose Java. Great. So you had the same answer, James. Nice. Let's reveal the answer, and the answer is Python. So yeah. So we have a different answer here. To be honest, when I think about this kind of vulnerabilities, I always think about languages like C. Recently, there were some requirements from the US government to try to not using C and C++, all these languages where you manage the languages, the memory.
Yep.
But what we've seen is that languages like Python use different packages. They use C under the hood, which creates this kind of relation to this kind of vulnerabilities. This is a screenshot taken from our vulnerability weaknesses database, where we analyze different categories of vulnerabilities. In this case, we can see the out of bound. It's a little bit small, but we can see that pip, which is the Python package manager, holds this type of vulnerabilities the most. This information is based on GitHub Security Advisory, which gives all the information about application level vulnerabilities and categorize them to CWEs. So we can do that. James, what do you think about the difference in the audience and your answer to the actual answer?
Yeah, I think it comes down to that bucket of like Java is definitely like the one that has because you have like serialization issues a lot with Java that don't really apply to other stuff. So it tends to get a lot of vulnerabilities. But here's what memory related stuff. I'm always tempted to put it in this bucket of like, all right, you've got to be like an Omega level super nerd to like ever exploit memory stuff. But I think with LLMs, attackers are able to more easily like create malicious payloads that do memory exploit because it makes it like more approachable and understandable what you're doing. And it's definitely like a sticky vulnerability that keeps coming up, especially because Python's getting more and more adopted. So I do think it's something that'll sort of continue to grow over the next few years. As much as I would like to think that it's something we can just start ignoring because it's like you have to be like super nerdy to figure out what the heck you're doing to exploit that.
I love Omega level super nerd is a great title. And I'm wondering if I could ask you guys to respond to the audience members saying that is there an argument for how prolific these systems are in your environment? So whichever one is the most in use should be your highest priority.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I've never thought about so first of all, in general, I haven't thought this way, but it was actually when I saw the CWE database is what made me start thinking of it that way as far as like what languages do we use and what sorts of attacks are we most susceptible to, and then how can we build around those. So things like if you're using a heavily opinionated framework like Django, to choose an arbitrary example, that's doing a lot of like cross-site scripting and authentication out of the box for you, like as long as you're not like manually trying to create weird sanitizers and authentication tokens, like the more customized you make something, the riskier it's going to be from like the out of the box standards that the framework provides you. And so I do think more and more that that's actually a good way to prioritize, is based on what types of attacks is your language base going to be the most susceptible to.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I did some research on that when we built this database that you have the screenshot from. So definitely languages like C are more vulnerable to memory-related vulnerabilities. And we've seen this trend of companies trying to change this technology, even though it's super hard to change the language. We all so basically each language is vulnerable to or commonly vulnerable for a specific category of vulnerabilities. I do see .NET, for example, as a less vulnerable language. The challenge is that we don't really know if it's not vulnerable because there are less vulnerabilities reported for it, because it's less common, or because it's less vulnerable. But we do know that the packages are being managed in a more closed environment, the Nugget packages, and there are more, in general, it is considered more secured.
Yep.
Okay. Moving to the next question. How many vulnerability types, CWEs, remain stubborn and in the top rank tables by Mitre over the last 6 years? So I'll give an explanation. So basically, every year there is a top 25 category of vulnerabilities being published by Mitre organization. And apparently, some of those categories remain in the table, which means that they are not being resolved and they are still repeating themselves. So the answer, the first possible answer is 80%, meaning that most of the vulnerabilities stay the same types of vulnerabilities. B, and B, 30%, or C, 60%. So let's start. James.
Yep. I think definitely 80 and 60 is the tough ones to choose between, because on the one hand, it certainly seems like there's new attacks coming up, but I'm trying to think about those in the context of CWEs and how they are sort of elastic the way an actual exploit will like fit into a CWE. And given the amount of times that I keep seeing like, how is SQL injection still the number one whatever, I'm going to go with 80% because I'm out of time.
Okay. So let's see what the audience shows. Okay, so most people think it's 60. And James, I'm not sure, what answer do you think is?
80.
80, okay. So, and the real answer is 80. So let's see the information. This is from a blog post that I posted a few months ago, where I compared on the left table the average or the top categories on the last 6 years, and on the right, 2023. And you can see that 80%, like the top 8 categories, remain the top issues. SQL injection, cross-site scripting, path traversal, the top types of vulnerabilities. And to be honest, if you look at the 9th option, improper input validation, it's very similar to the last one on the more recent table. So it's almost 90%. Yeah. So James, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I benefited from working on like some of the CWE stuff as far as like, I get why people would think that it's not as sticky is because the way, so like missing authorization as a category looks very different between like a Ruby app and then something that's using like JOTs and like a misconfigured JOT could on a public endpoint, on a public API endpoint would be in the same category as like a user's information that you forgot to authenticate them before you provided them in like a framework. And so I think it's the CWE stay the same, but the technical implementations are what changed so drastically. And so like even path traversal like looked very different when we're talking about like Windows-based path traversals versus now there's some really complicated like Kubernetes attacks where you try to get to the secret store via path traversal. And so it's the same category of attacks, but the implementations are pretty wildly different.
Right. I'll add on top of that looking at the actual data, you can see that there are families of categories of vulnerabilities. For example, type traversal, there are like 10 types of type traversals. And if you think about it, and if you look at the data, in most cases, humans or people manually reviewing the code, the vulnerability, and they categorize it. So they put it under the same category of past reversal. So it would have most of the categories looking at the data. The second thing that I want to clarify is that a lot of people, when they think about the top categories, they think about the OWASP top 10, which is great. And I've been working in the industry for many years on the web application firewall industry. And it's from very long time being like the standard for common type of vulnerabilities. To be honest, I think that it's no longer like the standard for attacks. Like it's standard for it became a much larger guideline for security. Some of the requirements are actually, it's not a requirement, it's some recommendation, and some best practices is like doing threat modeling and stuff, which is not a list of vulnerabilities, unlike the CWEs, which is the categories. And every year it's based on real data of the vulnerabilities in NVD and other databases, trying to understand what are the categories of vulnerabilities that are common for this year. So I look at it as a very reliable source of understanding what are the type of vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I think part of that with OWASP too, like a good example is how broken authorization keeps going up. As far as like, it's just people who like are, the permissions model is too complicated or the feature flag model is too complicated and they've messed up who gets access to what data, which obviously doesn't fit into like a CWE type of framework. It's more like application logic seems to be where OWASP keeps moving more and more towards. Exactly.
They also add things that fall under, categories of vulnerabilities, very generic stuff, supply chain and stuff like that, which is relevant and important.
Yeah.
Right. But it's very different from 10 years ago, where the OWASP top 10 would be a list of vulnerabilities or types of vulnerabilities than what it is now.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful how it's moved towards like the DevSecOps maturity model and the supply chain top 10 and the Kubernetes top 10 and the LLM top 10. I think it gives a lot of very important guidance to people based around the technologies they're using, as opposed to this like generic, oh, we do the web top 10, so we're fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so moving to the next one. So can attacker exploit a SQL injection, an SQL injection based on integer as user input? So we in Backslash, we do static code analysis and we find different types of vulnerabilities. So this is one of the questions that we've encountered coming from our customers and by our product who is doing the analysis. So the possible answers is no, yes, or yes with low impact. James.
Yeah, this is pushing me. I've been pushed to my limit here. Because I have seen enough scary SQL injections that my default answer is just yes. Before I like every example I've seen of like, I've never seen a post that's like, oh, finally there's SQL injections impossible with this thing. It's always like some workaround for it. So I'm just going to say yes, because I'm assuming that, I've seen gnarly SQL queries that seem to just work on everything. So, okay, great. So let's look at the answers from the audience. So most people thought that it is an issue. To be honest, I think it would be really interesting to know what developers think versus what security practitioners think. We'll see that later on offline. Yeah, so let's reveal the actual answer and argue about it. Sure.
So yes, it is possible, but it has some low impact. So basically, in the main impact a SQL injection can create is basically trying to fetch some data, read your information from your database, maybe push some data into your database, while basically manipulating the instruction and for that, in most cases, you would need to have a string. So that's for the most cases. You can, if you have some integer as an user input that gets to SQL injection line in the code, it is possible to inject value, but it would not be able to break the line and do what I've mentioned earlier. What it could do in some logical flows that use identifiers, it could basically change the identifier and give you, help you to do some logical, to manipulate some of the flows in the application. But generically, the standards, by the book SQL injection, where you get some user's password by, querying a different table, it's not possible. Security-wise, you need to think if you want to prioritize things. When I think about it as a product perspective, if I think about prioritizing things for my customers, or I want them to basically see everything. So my answer is that yes, we do show it in our product, but we show it with a less severity. So basically, we don't put it in the top of the table. We show it and give the customer the proper severity for this kind of finding. James, what do you think?
What do you think drives? I would assume that someone's either like using parameterized queries or they're not. Are you seeing like someone not doing it because they think it's safe because it's only an integer?
To be honest, yes, I've seen several teams that are doing, when we find SQL injections like true positives, the way to mitigate it is to change the parameter to an integer.
Oh, that's
so
good.
yeah. So
Right.
I definitely, I've seen it, and this is a security team recommendation, and it really depends on the flow of the application, and
yeah.
So again, my point of view as a security product, I surface and I give visibility to my customers, and they choose how to do things. I also give them the recommendation about the severity and what to do with it. And using ORMs and prepared statement, this is the standard answer, but there are some other options. It really depends on the application.
Okay.
And the language.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so moving to the next question. Which initial access vector is leveraged most frequently in successful intrusions in 2024? And this is based on some research from the last year. So A, supply chain compromise, which is having a package with a malicious file, like the SolarWinds, or any type related to it. B, exploit public-facing applications using different vulnerabilities or some credential usage or brute force. Or C, phishing, the human factor, right?
Yep.
Okay, James.
So supply chain compromise is definitely the hottest topic. But I think a lot of that is around seeing the trend going up over time, as opposed to the current impact of it. I think is still not super rare, and it's definitely increasing. But I think the successful attacks are less common because people generally use popular stuff. I've got to go with phishing because that's just what I would do if I was attacking.
Okay, so let's reveal the answer. Okay, so you had the same answer like the audience. So most of the people thought that phishing is the first or the most common initial access technique. And revealing the answer.
We got a right-in answer. I mean, Kevin wrote in and said, "People are the largest attack vector." So you got a bonus emphasis exclamation mark behind that.
I agree, and I'm going to have some surprising answer here. Exploit public-facing application. So this is based on a research from that I actually found several days ago, which was published by Google Security Group, which shows that exploit is the most common one, phishing is the next one, and we have here superior compromise, and we have stolen credentials, and at the last we have supply chain. So I'm going to be honest here. So I found different researchers showing different answers. So This one, which is the most recent, talks about exploitation. I saw one talking about compromised credentials, and I saw one that talks about the human factor, the phishing side. To be honest, my opinion is that those are the top three things, and it really depends on who is doing the research. On this specific one, it's exploits, which I also think is like a concern, a real concern. James, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I can make sense of this as far as like if you've ever run like a bug bounty program, you've definitely seen I have gotten way more bug bounty reports than I have successful phishing reports. And so I think it really I think when you get phished, the impact is almost guaranteed to be pretty big. Because you're handing over a set of privileged credentials, which is like just the worst thing you could do. Whereas what you count as an exploit could be anything as simple from like, I got a list of your employees' usernames from a public facing like HR portal to like someone accessed some endpoint that's used just for like throwaway data. And so I think it probably depends on how you cross this up with impact. Would be how you determine the frequency of it.
Yeah, I agree. My main takeaway is that those three vectors are the main ones that you need to be worried about. Everything which is internet facing or customer or user facing and can be exploited, vulnerable and packages and all of that, doing patch management. The second thing is phishing, of course. So, email and all these kind of ways you can affect the employees of the organization. And the last one is credentials, managing credentials in the organization, offboarding users, super critical. There are so many tools that look for secrets on public repositories and stuff like that. And mostly not for targeted attacks, for spray attacks, where as an attacker, you just look for different, what's available. And one more thing
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the last point is that supply chain, even though it's not very common, the impact is very high. So this kind of reports look at how common it is in actual incidents, but it might be not very common, but still very huge impact, which is still requires security attention.
Yeah, and that what I was going to say was just the tying of the exploit to the underlying OS is like the other thing that I'll say probably gets overlooked. So I think the good stack for people to aim towards is something like / that's doing the exploit detection on the code side. But then when that exploit is actually happening, like you have to detect that lateral movement. And I think a lot of times people can think of those as like two separate functions and miss like how related they are, especially in like Kubernetes and container environments.
Yeah, I recently encountered some CVE, which, and it happens a lot, but it's relevant for a specific operating system, only specific to version. Yeah. So it's definitely critical. Sometimes in the level of the configuration, and sometimes it's on the level of the operating system. Yeah, yep. I totally agree with you. Okay, so let's move to the next question. And the next question is, what is the ratio of direct to transitive packages in the famous, notorious Juice Shop benchmark application? So if you're not familiar with it, this is a JavaScript application which is vulnerable by design. And the question is how many, for every direct package that is being declared in the application, how many transitive indirect packages are also being added to this specific application? So the first answer, A, is 4. So for whenever we add one package there are 4 additional transitive packages. B is 15, and C is 100. And let's start the poll.
Woohoo. This is our first one in level 3, guys. First question in level 3.
It's it all comes down to how well you've memorized Juice Shop. And if you're ever a vendor, you know they've memorized Juice Shop because like, here's my real advice: is never buy a tool based on a juice shop demo, because like everyone's got 100% detection on juice shop. So I'll go just from my most recent npm install from when I was actually working on the video on backslash. I think it was closer to 15. It feels like 100 from the Vuln tools, but I'm going to go with 15. Final answer.
Okay. So let's see what the audience chose. And 15. But we also have few who chose 100. And also
it
4.
Feels like 100. When you look at how many freaking Vuln scanner results you get, it definitely feels like there's 100 transitives getting installed.
Great. So let's see the answer. And maybe before I reveal the answer, I'll show you that in the backslash platform. So let me share my screen. And let me just log in before I do that. Just a sec. So I'm going to show how we review the juice shop application in backslash platform.
Ooh.
Okay.
Real-time game show and demos. This is like a nesting doll of awesome. Okay, we see your screen. We gotcha.
Okay, great. So this is the backslash platform. You can see it here. So to show you that, let's go to our query screen that allows us to see basically everything that we can find, all the findings that backslash finds. Maybe before that, backslash is a platform that scans the applications from their code, from connecting to the Git repository. Then we analyze the different vulnerabilities and give information and prioritize vulnerabilities. And our main focus is doing reachability analysis. And with that, let's see how many packages we have. But let me filter for the specific application, the juice shop application. And let's see how many OSS packages we have here. We have 2,500 packages. And now let's see how many of them are actually direct. So 150, almost 150, and 2,500, which are transitive, which is the rate of around 15. So that's the answer. 15 is the answer. And basically you can see that we have so many packages here, and they all came from, those 23, 66 packages came from those 150 packages that were declared for this specific application. Okay, so the answer is B. James, anything to say about that?
No, it feels right. The only thing, when you were showing it, you even saw multiple transitive dependencies for the same dependency, but with different versions. And so it just speaks to the continued complex. Like if you have just what I'm calling like first generation SCA tools, like it'll just show up like both times that the transitive dependency you're using is outdated, as opposed to at least doing the work to figure out like what's the actual version that's going to have the vulnerability on it.
Exactly. So to me, it's when I first learned about this topic, it blew my mind, because I basically came from a container security background, and in container security you deal with packages that are on the OS level, and whenever you have a package, you have the package, right? So you need to fix it by upgrading the package. Very straightforward. You just have the list of packages. But when we scan applications from the code, in the code, the developer declares about the packages that he needs for his application. And under the hood, the package manager adds those transitive packages, which are the dependencies of the dependencies. And in some cases, you have this dependency tree, which is very deep, and in some cases, more than 10 steps in the dependency tree, which means that whenever you invite somebody to the party, many family members are also being added without your total control.
Yeah, and the real question is, do you need to fix transitive dependency vulnerabilities? Because they're almost never exploitable that way. It's not, but then you have in the back of your head, it's like it technically might be which is where reachability comes in. But like 99+% of the time, like you don't, they're not going to be exploitable in a transitive dependency kind of way.
Exactly. So you're hitting the nail on its head with the next question. So in the same application, in the juice shop application, what are the actual use or usage of the transitive packages? I'm sorry, the vulnerable ones. So out of the vulnerable ones, which ones are actually being used by the application and can be exploited? And the answer is 80%, 50%, or 3%.
I'm going 3%, and even that.
Oh, you didn't even need it. That's great because we're running short on time, so we can jet right through this one.
For this, I'm picking the lowest number. If 0.1% was an option, I would pick that. Because I am so I at this point I'm more shocked when I see a true positive than a false positive. So that's my answer. And we can give the audience a couple seconds, but boy, would I pick the smallest number.
Time's up. Wow.
Time's up. Okay, let's see the answer. Okay, so most people, 50% of the people thought that it's. I'm sorry, 3% of the people. It's confused me. I think that 50%.
This is one of those 100% of the time it works every time. We've got 50% of the people saying 3%, 42% saying 50%, and 7% saying 80%.
Right. And let's see the actual answer by looking at the Backslash platform again. Okay, so let me just remove this filter. And let's see the ones that are vulnerable. Out of all the packages in this specific application, we have 56 packages that are vulnerable. You can see here that most of them are not direct. And let's see how many of them are actually being reachable. Okay, so only 2, which is the 3%.
Yep. I believe it. Right. I'm surprised it's even that. In a real application that would have even more dependencies, that number would be even smaller.
I would argue based on real information that I've seen, because if you think about it, the Juice Shop, the application was designed for code vulnerabilities, things like SQL injection. So I think there is no bench application for vulnerabilities like package vulnerabilities. Most of them are trying to show you how to do code vulnerabilities. And in real life applications, when people add packages, they add them for a reason. They usually actually use them. So we've seen a higher rate, but it's still very low, which shows that most packages are not being used, cannot be exploited. We've seen rates between 2% to 20%, which is amazing in the way that it does the reduction. And really, I think it really challenged the previous approach of looking at everything that is vulnerable and trying to fix it. In my opinion, it's a game changer.
Yep.
Amit, I just want to let you know we've got about 3 questions left, and we've got about 6 minutes. So we're gonna fire through our last 3 questions.
Okay. So the next question is how many CNAPP or cloud native application protection platform, this is the latest category from Gartner, are being generated from one unreachable package, which can be found by a platform like Backslash and others. So to clarify, whenever we find one package which is vulnerable, how many alerts, how many issues will be surfaced by security products that run on runtime? A, 0, B, 10, or C, 120. And James.
Yep. I'm trying. It depend. I'm in the weeds too much. I know too many CNAP. It would depend on your CNAP. I think some would do 10, and I think some would do 120. There's some that built around alerts, and like their whole methodology is like every 30 days you would get an alert for this crap, in which case it would be 120. But then there's some that are a little bit better and at least like merge those results together, and it would be 10. So I'll go 120, assuming that you're talking about the bad CNAP ones.
Okay. So revealing the audience answer, this is 10. Most people thought that it's 10. And my answer is 120. It really depends on the platform, the CNAP platform. The main reason I gave this answer is that, and I have some previous past leading
that's right.
this kind of products.
I should have answered for Aqua.
So Aqua would basically look at the runtime, right? And other products that are doing CNAP would look at the runtime. So it would consider for the same package, it would consider the staging, the production. And if you run Kubernetes, OpenShift requires the minimum replica set of like 3 nodes. So you would have this kind of replication. So you would end up with like 10. But if you also consider the transitive packages that are unreachable and you could find them when you analyze the code, runtime tools in most cases will not do that. They will just repose the package that's vulnerable and will give you these alerts. So that's the reason for the answer. Because we are short in time, let's move to the next one quickly. What's the main 2 benefits of detecting AppSec risks from a centralized code repo versus runtime? So A, easier to remediate, B, can be shift left, C, time to visibility, and D, scan accuracy. This is a kind of opinionated question, so let's run it as the last question before we finish up.
Yes. I think this is probably the core debate happening right now in SCA. People doubling down into runtime versus people doubling down into like code reachability. I do legitimately think that it makes shift left and remediation from a developer perspective more easy because it's like tying it back to the code side. But I do think there's some benefits to runtime reachability as far as like the granularity of the execution data. So, yeah.
Exactly. And the audience answer is divided between easier to remediate, like you said, because it's closer to the code, and time to visibility. My answer would be time to visibility because it's centralized and you can quickly see everything from one place, and scan accuracy because of the reachability thing. But basically, all the answers are relevant. That's the main reasons to choose scanning from the code. I think we have 2 minutes left. Jess, do you suggest run another question or finish up?
Well, you know what? As much as I want to run another question, I really would like to wrap up with just a little bit more insight into backslash. So maybe just tell us the answer to this last one, and then tell us a little bit about how we can kind of keep rolling this conversation with backslash.
Right. So let me just run to the relevant slide here. So backslash is a platform that I showed earlier, which is focused on reachability analysis based on scanning the code, finding the vulnerabilities that are related to the code, like SQL injection, path reversal, and also packages that are vulnerable, and trying to understand which one is actually can be exploited by attackers, has a flow, an application flow that allows attackers to actually do something with it, and then prioritize all of these types of risks. Among other things that we do, like supply chain attacks, secrets, our main core is in doing this reachability analysis to help application security teams prioritize and fix their security technical debt. So that's everything. Thank you, everybody. And Jess, do you want to say?
Well, I do first and foremost, and I'm going to come back to this link slide, but I have to show this. Dun, 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 dun. James,
I missed you.
Yeah.
James is
you
the
have
winner.
3 years.
Yeah.
Amit,
James, you get 3 years
somebody...
subscription for the backslash
Go ahead,
platform.
Amit.
It's an exciting place to be.
If somebody out there answered every single question right, and or if somebody out there got every single question wrong, what should they do to either learn more or put their expertise to good work? How should they continue this conversation with you, Amit?
So first of all, if you are interested in a demo for our product, you can reach our website and book it. And if you just want to reach out for anything else which is not related to the product or company, you can feel free to approach me on LinkedIn. I don't have my LinkedIn here, but it's Amit Bismut. Maybe we can send it in the chat now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, we can pull that up. You get
and
that
also
in, I'll make sure we publish it.
My / email as well. I'll just write it in the chat.
Perfect. We'll get that to everybody so everyone can follow up. Well, Amit is doing that. James, any final words from our guest expert winner here today?
You can follow me on LinkedIn or go to latio.tech or join our Discord because we're a cool Discord kind of place to be instead of Slack. So,
because we're a cool Discord kind of place to be is a great final thought.
It's definitely it's the place where engineers go because they're all gaming, and so the Discord thing is better by people.
Might as well. All right, I'm just posting. I'm gonna make sure we get this out to everybody live. All right, so check the Slack or the chat here. Check the Slack, check the Discord, check the Teams, whatever. Check the chat here, and you can see Amit's / security email address. So Amit, that's a good way to follow up with you directly.
Yes.
Perfect. All right.
James,
well, and
thank
I'm
you.
going to post to your LinkedIn.
Yes, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you,
Jess.
This
has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming to play the game. James, you won handily. Congratulations. I hope we all get to play again soon.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Amit. All right. Well, and to everyone out there who participated in our game, I answered those questions. Again, you're entered to win that Best Audience Member Award that we'll be giving away, the $50 Amazon gift card. I'm going to give away the $250 Amazon gift card in just a moment here. And I also want to say that for the questions that came in during our session, if we didn't get to you in our live discussion, you will get a follow-up from /. So if you have any questions right now that you really want to make sure get answered, please feel free to post those in the questions window and you'll get a response back. I also want to remind you to visit the handouts tab. So you've got some links over to check out /. You've got that reachability analysis. You can check out the CWE database. You've got vulnerabilities you shouldn't fix. This is such a cool article. I love that. So please do make sure that you're doing that. Most important thing, and I think Amit hit this really well right at the end, is to book that demo. Make sure that you're booking that demo, you're booking that follow-up, continue this conversation, because again, whether you won Who Wants to be an AppSec-ionaire today or you lost it horribly, and no judgment, we all know who we are, there is something more to learn, right? There's more discussion to be had. So make sure that you're reaching out and continuing this conversation with /. All right. Well, I said I would give away a prize. Let's do a quick prize giveaway here. We have a $250 Amazon gift card going to a lucky prize winner here with us. And that is Tim Skagerberg from Minnesota. Tim Skagerberg from Minnesota. Good Minnesotan last name there, Tim. I like it. All right, Tim. Well, as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap. So stay tuned for that. And we will also be following up with our Apple section or app. Why do I keep saying Apple? AppSec-ionaire. My brain is completely hung up on saying AppSec-ionaire. AppSec-ionaire. And we will follow up with our AppSec-ionaire winner at the end. So you can join James in the annals of history as our grand prize winner, and you'll get that $50 Amazon gift card. All right, my friends. Well, with that, I want to say a big and giant thank you to / security for making this webinar possible today. A huge thank you to Amit and to James for guiding us through such an interesting conversation and for having fun. What a fun game this was. You know, there's a lot of great and key information here But sometimes it's nice to just step back and play a little bit. So I hope that you all really enjoyed playing this game with us today. I know that I enjoyed chatting with all of you and hearing from all of you, and really enjoyed learning alongside all of you as we went through our game. I hope that we get to play again soon. Hopefully you'll come back and join us for our next installment of AppSec-ionaire, and we'll see if we can beat our high scores. We'll see if we can win together. All right, my friends. Well, thank you so much for joining. I can't wait to see you all again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to